The more time I've spent making videos and learning about Taoism, the more and more I'm starting to see a serious issue cropping up among those who consider themselves to be Taoists. There are a lot of misunderstandings that run around about Taoism, but probably the one I see happening the most is a misunderstanding of Wu Wei, and this is a serious problem. For those of you who might be new to the channel or to Taoism, Wu Wei means effortless action, non-action, or doing by the act of non-doing. Wu Wei means that you accept circumstances in your life over which you have no control, and allow your actions to flow naturally, rather than trying too hard or attempting to force things to be what they are not. This is a pretty esoteric concept, so it makes sense that there should be a lot of misunderstanding around it. I've realized over the years that a very pervasive tendency, especially among new Taoists, is to assume that Wu Wei means inaction or no effort. I observe that a lot of people interpret the Taoist concept of letting go of desires to mean that you should completely kill all desires and not strive at all. Again, I think this is a pretty natural mistake to make, especially since a lot of people are drawn to Taoism as an alternative to the breakneck pace of modern hustle culture and the near idolatrous worship of hard work that is so pervasive in our society. When we perceive a certain belief or a way of life as undesirable, it's pretty common for us as people to run to the opposite extreme. But the more life I live, the more I'm beginning to find that truth is usually somewhere in the middle of the polar extremes. If you've become attracted to Taoism, it's likely that you've already seen the negative effects of too much effort, but I'm here to tell you that no effort at all is equally problematic. I think the whole issue comes down to a misunderstanding of desire. Taoism is heavily concerned with letting go of desires and going with the flow of nature, such as in this passage of the Tao Te Ching. Those whose desires are few get them. Those whose desires are great go astray. Now, many people, especially new Taoists, read passages like these and take them to mean that they should eradicate all desires from their hearts and minds. Then it's a pretty easy transition from, I need to let go of all my desires, to, I need to stop having goals or plans. See, here's the thing though, Taoism is not against having desires. I just used the last two lines from chapter 22 of the Tao Te Ching to show how Taoism advises against great desires, but take a look at the lines immediately before it. If you want to become whole, first let yourself become broken. If you want to become straight, first let yourself become twisted. If you want to become full, first let yourself become empty. If you want to become new, first let yourself become old. Note how the passage uses the words, if you want. Far from telling you to kill all desires, this passage acknowledges a desire it assumes you have, and then offers advice on how to get it. If you want to become whole, first let yourself become broken. This passage isn't telling us to completely get rid of our desires. It's telling us that the best way to get our desires is to first let them go, and only then can they be truly fulfilled. I think the best way to understand this is to consider two different types of desires, and since I can't think of any place where I've seen a name given to them, I'll refer to them simply as type 1 desires and type 2 desires. I don't want to call them bad desires and good desires because I think this is a little too black and white. After all, a person can desire a good thing in a bad way. So to keep things simple, I will call them type 1 and type 2. Type 1 desires are the sort of desires we are most often exposed to in the modern world. A type 1 desire is a sort of desperate desire, one that tends to take up a lot of space in the mind. Type 1 desires sometimes manifest as a determination to get what one wants, regardless of its impact on other areas of the person's life. Sometimes it manifests as a smoldering pit of resentment for a dream that may never happen. It may also come out as a defiant determination to get what one deserves. Whatever it looks like, a type 1 desire is obstinate, self-centered, and self-willed. It does not bring pleasure to the person who has it. It cannot possibly do so, because it lives exclusively in the future. Type 1 desires always look forward to something in the future to make one happy. There is not joy in the present moment with a type 1 desire. This is because of a simple rule: pleasure can only happen in the present. It is not possible to experience pleasure in the future, only anticipation of pleasure. In fact, anticipation of future pleasure, if allowed to run amok, leads to impatience, irritability, greed, and selfishness. Contrast this with what I'm going to call a type 2 desire. Type 2 desires can be kind of difficult to wrap your head around, because we honestly don't see a lot of examples of it in the culture most of us grow up in. A type 2 desire is a sort of softer, more pliant desire, but it is no less powerful than a type 1 desire. A type 2 desire has the same ability to carry a person to the thing being desired, but it understands that the object being desired is not a requirement for survival or happiness. It accepts the possibility of not getting it, and it also stays open to being taught the best way to get the thing desired, without insisting on cutting its own path. A person desiring something with a type 2 desire has the same ability to get the thing desired, but can also let go of the desire if need be. A type 2 desire respects the pushes and pulls of the universe and nature above its own desires. It trusts the universe to bring it what it really wants, and acknowledges that this might come at the expense of what it thinks it wants. Unlike a type 1 desire, which is focused entirely on the future, a type 2 desire allows a person to experience pleasure and joy in the present moment, because it does not make one's happiness conditional upon something happening in the future. Again, sadly, we have precious few examples of type 2 desires around us to look to. There is certainly very little, if any, to be found in popular films, commercials, and media. This is partially because we do not honor type 2 desires in the same way that we worship the hard work, obstinacy, and determination often associated with type 1 desires. But this is also because type 2 desires just don't sell very well. Businesses generally are not very interested in pushing ads geared toward the type 2 desires, because type 1 desires are much easier to manipulate. Think about how much easier it would be to sell a product that promises health, wealth, or beauty to someone who has already made up their mind that they cannot live without these things. The truth is, of course, that you can live without perfect health, wealth, or beauty. Plenty of people do, and manage to lead very productive lives. A person with a type 2 desire cannot be manipulated in the same way as a person with a type 1 desire, because a person with a type 2 desire is able to let go of the desire at will, and understands that the thing being desired is not a requirement for their happiness. In other words, their happiness does not count on some specific thing going their way. They can be happy whether it happens or not, and they have confidence in this fact. Perhaps the easiest way to tell the difference between a type 1 and type 2 desire is to notice whether the desire causes one to become preoccupied with the future or allows one to live fully in the present. It goes without saying that almost all people are mostly used to having type 1 desires, and that learning to have type 2 desires will take some getting used to. This is certainly difficult, but not impossible. The goal is to get to where you could spend several hours working toward a goal, if that's what you're being called to do, and then, when you are finished, be able to put it out of your mind completely, and attend to the needs and joys of the present. You can still work towards a goal in the future while living in the present. Planning the duties of tomorrow is today's duty. The test is whether or not you can then lay it down and attend to your other present duties, without experiencing either too much hope or anxiety about the result of this goal in the future. I'll share one more excerpt from the Tao Te Ching. This is from chapter 19. It is more important to see the simplicity, to realize one's true nature, to cast off selfishness and temper desire. Notice the use of the phrase temper desire. Oxford Languages defines the verb to temper as to improve the hardness and elasticity of steel or another metal by reheating and then cooling it. Now, if you know anything about blacksmithing, you know that tempering is one of the most important processes for strengthening a metal. For example, when a skilled blacksmith makes a sword, it requires extensive tempering in order to be useful. A sword that has not been tempered is much more brittle because it is too inflexible. Tempering a sword allows it to flex when under pressure, and this flexibility greatly increases the sword's strength and resilience. Tempering a desire works the same way. We make our desires stronger, more resilient, and more able to produce positive results by allowing them to be flexible. A desire that obstinately takes what it wants will do more harm than good most of the time. It's the difference between graciously receiving a gift from someone and taking a gift by force that was already being given to you. The universe knows your desires better than even you do, and you have to be able to trust that it's in the process of giving you exactly what you want. Sometimes, however, the path to what we really want goes directly through the valley of what we don't want. This is part of the process. The experience of opposition gives clarity to your desires and increases the depth of your understanding. There are some desires that are best received by first experiencing the opposite. If you want to become whole, first let yourself become broken. If you want to become straight, first let yourself become twisted. If you want to become full, first let yourself become empty. If you want to become new, first let yourself become old. I hope this is all making sense. The long and short of all this is that wholesome and fruitful desires, type 2 desires, are based in trust. These desires lead to fulfillment, peace, and joy. Selfish, stubborn, and self-willed desires, or type 1 desires, are based in the perception of lack and scarcity. These desires lead to exhaustion and frustration. So as you can see, Taoism isn't about completely getting rid of all your desires at all. It's about learning to make them more powerful and more fruitful by allowing them to become more flexible. This is a lesson that any true seeker of happiness will have to learn at some point. So hopefully this video can give you a little bit of a shortcut. Thanks for watching. Peace and blessings.